What's going on, Flight Sim Crew? It's your pilot in command, Ryan, and today I'm going to go through some settings that may help you to get the most out of your video card in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So, I do not have the most high-end system in the world, so this video here is going to cover settings that I find to be most useful, starting with the NVIDIA control panel. Going into the NVIDIA control panel, we're going to change the 3D settings to maximize quality, as well as image scaling. We're going to turn that on, and then we will create personal settings within Microsoft Flight Sim. Alright, so here you can see I'm in the NVIDIA control panel, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable this feature, and I am going to kind of just leave it at default. If you want to move that up or down, you can. But basically, what this is going to be doing is it's going to allow the native drivers to do some of the rendering as opposed to Microsoft Flight Simulator doing the rendering. So later, I'll turn off some settings in the sim. And next, I'm going to build a profile specifically for Microsoft Flight Simulator. So here, I simply went in to the following option. Microsoft Flight Simulator is not listed, so I'm going to hop over into my Steam, right click, browse files, so I can get the exact location of where the flightsim.exe is located. I'll copy and paste that into my Explorer bar, and in just a moment here you should see it's going to pop up, and then I'll click on flightsim.exe and OK, and that will allow me now to create a profile within NVIDIA's custom drivers specifically for Microsoft Flight Sim. So a couple little caveats as far as what my system is running. I have an Intel i7 and Peter, which has been quite a few years ago. DDR4 was brand new on the scene at that time, and there had been a bit of a RAM shortage, so RAM was outrageously expensive. I knew I was going to need it for video editing, so I went with 32 gigabytes of DDR3 because that was the most that I could afford at the time. In hindsight, 32 gigabytes is probably a bit excessive, especially with current DDR4 and DDR5, and rarely do I ever see a need for more than about 16 gigabytes of RAM. I do have solid state drives that I keep most of my information on. I have some old spindle drives that I consider to be long term storage, but Microsoft Flight Simulator is 100% held on a solid state drive. And as I do like the updates that Microsoft has been doing, it's worth noting that between updates and purchases from the marketplace, Microsoft Flight Simulator has grown tremendously. It is approximately 333 gigabytes in size, taking up the vast majority of my solid state, and it seems to be working on trying to just dominate that entire solid state. So at some point in the future, I may have to buy another solid state for everything else, and just let Microsoft Flight Sim have an entire solid state hard drive. All right, so I went with the NVIDIA 2090. I think. Hold on. Supra. It might have been 2080. Sorry, 2080 Supra. At the time, it was released maybe 2 weeks. Or excuse me, I purchased it 2 weeks before the release of the next video card of that generation, and some of my friends told me that I should just go ahead and return the card, but if you guys recall during the pandemic, video cards, GPUs were almost hard to come by, and that card that was released 2 weeks later was bought up by all the scalpers, and you couldn't find it anywhere. So my 2080 Supra has, treated me well. Very happy with it, but it is time to step up the game, so to speak. Can't afford the those crazy 4080, 4090 Ti, what have yous, but we'll let Nvidia figure out uh, their market meltdown right now. Okay, so in Microsoft Flight Sim, there are going to be some files that I'm going to be modifying directly. So there is a user config file that is you'll be able to find in your file tree. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Once we get in there, though, we're gonna open that file with either Notepad, which just comes on all Windows computers, or if you're someone who's more into programming or just wants to have a nice utility, I highly recommend a program called Notepad++, which is very similar to Notepad, except it's geared around people who um, will tinker with code, be that HTML code or any type of computer code. That program is ideal for, and I highly recommend it. Once we're in there, we're going to be searching for post process, and then we're going to make modifications to lens distortion. We'll set that to 0, and film grain we will set to 0. The reason why we're doing that is that the lens distortion and film grain really just takes away from the aesthetics of the game. It maybe it's supposed to add more real world flair. I don't know. That's silly and pointless to me. I want my I want my experience to look good. I don't care about the sun casting a lens flare, in my eye if I happen to pan to where the sun is. That's not something that is value to me. As a matter of fact, in real life, when I go flying, I always carry a backup pair of sunglasses just in case the sun gets too low or I have to turn and the sun is suddenly in my eyes because the sun is not fun. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make those changes to those settings and those settings alone. We're not going to go too wild in here. And if you want to be on the safe side, you can always save this file as a backup. So you basically just take the file, create a copy of it, name it .old or just -old to show that it's the old file, and then you can modify this one. Most important thing when you're done making these changes, you must go file and save. If you don't save, if you just X out of it, it's going to dump all the changes that you made, and then that you just wasted your time. And as you can see here, the the film grain has some pretty negative effects on some of the rendering. I believe specifically it's the cloud. I believe it's the borders of the clouds. If I'm wrong, then it's the shadows. But either way, it's not something that I think brings any added value to your experience. All right, so next up here, we're going to be actually modifying the files that are in game. I do want to note that the config file that we just edited, because that was part of the core program files. You can't have Microsoft Flight Sim running when you make that change, or if you do have it running, you need to completely close out the program and then relaunch the program so that it pulls the correct information from that config file. Once in the simulator, we're going to play a balancing act, and this is going to be where I'm going to leave it to you, the audience, to tweak how you like to tweak. For example, myself, lens flare, as I just mentioned, I can't stand lens flare. Get lost. I'm not J.J. Abrams. I don't want to be part of his films. I don't like lens flares. Shadows, to me, some people love shadows, and if you're one of those people that love shadows, props to you. Shadows, to me, and I come from someone who used to do mapping in Half-Life Hammer, which, if you know anything about that, they were terrible at trying to do shadows. But shadows to me are not a good return on investment, basically. So shadows take a lot of computational power. They put high demand on your graphics card, yet they don't provide that much aesthetic value, in my opinion. Some people love their shadows. For me, shadows are something that I just don't care about. So I would much rather save those GPU cycles for more important things like making my airplane look good, making the weather look good, making the airport and the stuff, the terrain and the buildings look good, than I would with something as silly as shadows. To me. And then as you use these settings, you're going to need to find a bit of a balancing act. So, for example, here in a few moments, I'm going to show you there's like trees and shrubs. Well, trees and shrubs don't provide me with much value when I'm flying an airplane up in the sky. So I'd rather turn those to medium or low and then turn other settings to high or ultra. So, for example, my buildings that when I fly over a city, or the airport and the airport vehicles like the trucks and the crew, I might want them to have ultra because when I'm taxiing my airplane on the ground and a fuel truck drives by, I see that fuel truck. It's very close. It's very obvious to me, and having it look good just enhances my experience. Whereas a shrub, somewhere off in the distance, just doesn't bring any value to me. I don't care if a shrub looks like a shrub or if it looks like a 2D piece of paper mache. At the end of the day, it's a green blob that has no impact on my experience in aviation. So, with that little bit of a rant there, I only say that because, everyone's going to have their own things they like and things they don't like. So, in these settings, you are going to want to tweak until you find what you like. So, someone that I follow here that in a similar vein of my YouTube account, that person loves the rendering of the ocean. So he likes high detail in water. He loves the waves to have a nice look to them, and that is just very important to him. I completely respect that. Personally, that's wouldn't be high on my list. I would much rather my clouds look, you know, very well done and very sharp in image, more than I would the water. Only because for me, I spend more time flying up near and around clouds than I do down at water level. Now, some point in this my channel, I'm going to start to get into flying seaplanes, and maybe I might change on that. Maybe I want that water to look pristine as I'm attempting to land on it. But we'll see about that. The point of me babbling about that is that really this is going to be your personal preference. So as you look at this, like you can see here, I've got grass and bushes at low, trees medium, buildings high, and water waves medium, shadows, I've turned that down a little bit, and object level of detail is turned kind of on the lower side, mostly just because it's not having good frames per second, and having an experience where my cockpit, like specifically the glass cockpit refresh rate, that's a pretty high demand option on your video card, and I would much rather have my glass cockpit updating, at its highest way possible, and then to sacrifice the performance of my most important gauges, the part that tells me where my plane's going. I wouldn't want to turn that down only to increase something like boats on the water, or uh, animals that might be roaming the prairie, which I've literally never seen in all the 200 and some hours I've spent in Microsoft Flight Simulator to date. So I don't want to make this video too terribly long, so I'm kind of getting close to the end here. Basically, after you set these things the way you want to, you got to apply those changes, and it will tell you if you must reboot. However, when I say reboot, I mean completely close out of Microsoft Flight Simulator and reopen Microsoft Flight Simulator. Just do it no matter what. Once you're done with your changes and you hit that save and apply, just exit the desktop, go back into it, and launch it. This is a two-part video, so I'm going to save for my next video, which will be coming up here in just a moment, what this looks like. I'm actually going to show you all the settings based off of the video card that I just worked with, the 2080 Supra, I'm going to show you external 2D of the aircraft. I'm going to show you 3D rendering of what the aircraft would look like through VR. And then I'm going to install the video card that I just purchased, which is a 3080. And I will then show the same thing. I'm going to show you the two-dimensional view of flying the aircraft, and then I'll do a VR interface with it so that you guys can get a feel for it. I'll be using the exact same location, so hopefully you all will enjoy that. Stick around for the next video. I'll try to link it here now, and yeah, I appreciate your time.
Out of bed at 8 a.m. Out my head by 10:30. Out with mates and dates and friends. That's what I do at weekends.